Welcome to Unlocking High Performance. I'm your host, Jason Lauritsen. I'm an advisor to CEOs and leadership teams who want to accelerate performance without burning people out. My guest today is Kate Bravery. Kate is the senior partner and global leader of talent advisory at Mercer. She is also the co-author of the book, Work Different: 10 Truths for Winning in the People Age. She's also the author of Mercer's Talent Trends Report, which is why she's here today. Now, if you haven't seen this report in the past, it is really something. It's really rich and really insightful, and the 26 findings are in. So Kate joins me to discuss what this year's report shows. There are some interesting and important findings that we dig into about what's changing in the workplace, spoiler alert, a lot, and the shifting demands on leadership. Some really good stuff. So please enjoy Kate Bravery. Kate, thanks for taking time to join me. I am so excited to dig into this data with you.
Pleasure. Great to be here, Jason. I know we've been chatting about it for a while.
Yeah, well, and I know there's, so much in it. This is such a substantial report. So before we get into talking about, we're going to obviously just pick at a few areas of the findings, but can you share a little bit about the report overall, kind of how long Mercer's been doing this and kind of how big the study is?
Absolutely. I think the report's in its 11th year. I know it's over a decade. It's gone like that. I've had the privilege of working on it since its inception. And that's a long time to get views on employee sentiment at work. And it's an interesting study because it's a accumulation of 12,000 voices around the world. And when I say around the world, I think it's 24 countries in this year's study. We look at it across 16 different industries, and it's an amalgamation of executives, investors, HR, and employees. And so we listen to all four of those voices to say, what do they think this year is going to be like? What do they think the priorities are? What priorities do they think are really going to deliver a return? And of course, one of the fascinating things we always look at is where there's alignment or misalignment. Are we really listening to employees' voices, or are the investors dominating? So it's been a pleasure to be working on it. This year's findings, though, are pretty stark.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I would say it's a really interesting report. There's so much in it. And for those that are interested, you certainly can find it. I'll include links to where you can find these reports in the show notes. So you can go look at last year's report. Last year's report is still full of all kinds of interesting insights, but I'm anxious to talk about this year. And so let's start with, I guess, the thing that I am perhaps most interested in is, you do take a look at kind of what is the state of employee experience right now across the globe. And so what did you find this year about kind of how employees are feeling about work?
Well, Jason, I think you hit the nail on the head. And you and I were speculating about this last year as to how the results. And it's unfortunate to say some of the hypotheses we had did play out. So one of the questions we ask in Global Talent Trends every year is, how are you thriving in your job? And, we rate that on a sort of 1 to 5 scale. And this year, which is over a decade, we've seen the lowest results ever in people's sense of thriving. Only 44% of the global workforce, and I think that's over 9,000 of the people in the study, said they're thriving. And 2 years ago, it was already dropping, and it was at 66%. But to drop from 66% to 44%, someone who does a lot of stats, I don't see that type of 33% drop all the time. And I think it's telling. So there is definitely a strong voice to be saying, work's no longer working for me. I'm really struggling to stay abreast, keep up, feel inspired about the future. And I think that's a really worrying call. At the same time, there is also a lot of excitement through the report. Executives, investors are very excited about this new AI-human amalgamation that will be the workforce of the future. There's a big theme about how do we drive exponential performance when we combine the two together. And even employees are beginning to say, yeah, I can see how AI can make a huge difference to my job. But that sort of general sense of thriving has dropped. So I think that's a big call out. And that's going to be pretty tough because if I look at what executives are driving this year, it's pretty aggressive transformation and a real drive for those productivity or performance outputs. Now you're trying to drive significant transformation, new ways of working, encourage AI adoption at a time when people are disengaged, distracted, depleted, even disenchanted. That's going to be a pretty tall order for this year.
So if we go back to the thriving data, and I mean, I guess on the surface, it makes sense to me that you would find that employee thriving is, or at least their feeling of thriving is at an all-time low, at least for that data set. I think Gallup's most recent data has employee engagement near record lows globally as well.
Mm-hmm. Our engagement data shows the same.
Yeah. Was there anything that you saw or have seen yet? I know there's so much data there that you think is potentially one of the, or are the key drivers of that? Is there anything, I mean, is this a reaction to global economy shifts? Is it a reaction to AI coming for my job? Is it the typical stuff? Like, I'm curious, why is this happening? Why are employees struggling right now?
We also do a lot of engagement data. So I also, just before the call, had a chance to look at all the engagement data for this year. And we are still seeing it decline downwards. And there are some real implications of that. There's implications on, am I going to go that extra mile in terms of productivity? Mm-hmm. There's implications for turnover. What's my intent to leave? And just general willingness to learn new things, particularly related to AI. So I think there's a real consequence if we don't address it. In terms of sort of what's happening there, well, actually, with all our clients, we do key driver analysis. And when we do that key driver analysis, the same things come up time and time again. One, dissatisfaction that your pay doesn't go as far as it used to go. So that is a combination of internal pay parity, or at least perceptions of internal pay parity, but also economic conditions, inflation, things that hurt our pocket. Regardless of what's in your top 5, career opportunities and sort of the velocity of which I can move is coming up time and time again. And it's less about status. I want that next job or that next hierarchy on the rung. It's more coming from a fear. I'm not learning at the pace that work is changing, whether it's AI or whether it's new work habits. There is a real worry that I might not have the skills that are going to keep me relevant for the longer term. And so career velocity, opportunity for skills, these are coming up time and time again. But what I will say, when I look at the thriving data, the population that is the least thriving is the millennials. The population that is most vocal about how they want things to be different is the Gen Ys. And a lot of that comes from work-life balance. So there's a piece about particularly those younger 2 cohorts. I say they're younger, they're not now. They're still, they're younger than you and I, maybe. But those 2 cohorts are feeling that they're not heard and they're not valued and respected for the work they do. They're feeling that they can't get the work-life balance, which is really important for their mental state. And quite frankly, they feel that some of our talent processes are fit for a bygone time. And to be honest, I'd have to agree with them. I mean, many of them were built for sort of annual cycles because that's when we could mail out an engagement survey or, HR could do the system for your performance management. That's not the world we live in now. And now I think with AI coming in, there's a lot more agile ways that we can be using data to have more responsive talent processes. So I think people are getting to see glimmers of what could be, but many are sort of feeling stuck. And to the point about feeling stuck, there are more people in the workforce today that want to leave, that are saying, I'm staying put because I don't see the opportunities out there. So because in many markets that we've been talking about before we got on the call, it isn't a buoyant labor market. They're staying in jobs that they're not enjoying. And the minute they do have options, they're out. And that's not a workforce that's going to be with you on that transformation journey.
Mm-mm. It seems to me, it feels like a bit of a powder keg, right? I mean, that there will come a spark at some point that ignites a lot of this pent up thing. Because one of the trends that is often hard to see, I think, in data like this is, but yet seems to be, at least in my work with clients I see all the time, is that we have in a lot of places, leadership infrastructure, management infrastructure that's not terribly effective. It's not great at communication. It's not great at sort of the basic blocking and tackling of setting clear agendas and setting clear expectations and creating accountability and communicating to remove uncertainty from the system so people can move kind of with certainty towards the things that matter. And so you have that as the sort of the infrastructure. And then what I just heard you say is we have all these things that are now sort of putting pressure on the system, right? The economy is changing. So my comp is now maybe it was okay. Now it doesn't feel okay. The pace of my career felt okay. Now it doesn't feel okay because things are changing so quickly. AI is bringing uncertainty into it. And so it feels like the system was barely holding it. I mean, global engagement levels haven't been high maybe ever. We've never had a perfect system of employment. But I mean, does that feel right? I mean, it feels to me like it's just pressure building in the system that there will be at some point in the next several years, if the economy turns in some way that makes it easier for people to move, or there's more opportunity, that could be really, really harmful to organizations if they're not paying attention to their talent.
You said it's like a powder cake that's going to spark. And
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I've been doing this for over a decade. I've never seen results as worrying as I've seen them this year. And so I do think we should be listening to this data.
Yeah.
And, you hit some of the points there. We need to have very honest conversations about how AI is coming into the workforce. We did a study at the end of last year on AI adoption, and we only found that 1 in 5 employees said their manager had a conversation about how AI might change their jobs. So we're not having those basic level conversations, let alone getting into talent processes around performance and, and potential, all of that good stuff. So I think there's a baseline that we've got to set here. Secondly, many of HR said our high potential and our succession processes no longer work. So I don't know the skills that people have, and I don't know their potential to move. So we've got challenges on that side. And then the reality is the work is changing. And the organizations that I think have been able to unlock that sort of performance improvement have been ones that have been doing intentional work redesign. And if you bring your people along with you, so they are engaged with what is the work of the future, how can we disaggregate the tasks of today and look at whether it's better placed with humans and machines, and we can combine the better. When they're involved in that process, actually, then their anxiety levels are reduced. But what we are seeing is if people are just having access to AI, but they're not actively involved in redesigning the work, anxiety levels are going up. It's what we call the proximity paradox. When people get close to AI tools, they think, oh my gosh, this really could disrupt my job. And that's fascinating. When we look at it by countries, I think UAE is the highest. I think some of the European countries are the lowest. The more exposure you have, the more people are worried. I think 2 years ago, just 20 people said, I'm worried that AI could take my job. It's now 40%. That's a staggering increase. But again, that's not conducive for people feeling comfortable about embracing the new. And then we put, you and I both know, there's so many headlines on AI being cited for the reason for restructuring.
Right.
And if we keep talking about AI eroding jobs and job prospects, that's not going to help the situation.
No.
We need to pivot the narrative to talk about how can we together redesign work, and redesign work not just to unlock productivity, but to make jobs more enjoyable, more inspiring, tackle the burnout issue. Because the reason why these younger generations are feeling fed up at work is because they feel exhausted. They're entering this year saying, I don't feel I'm being compensated fairly for the work that I'm doing. I'm not inspired by my leader in a way that I used to be, particularly around this AI future. And I feel like I don't have enough capacity to actually think about my job. And that's not fun for anybody.
Well, and to make matters worse, I guess, or more concerning, I shouldn't say matters are what matters are in a research project, but your past reports have revealed, I think fairly consistently, a misalignment or a disconnect between what executives are thinking about and what's important and what HR or what the HR talent agenda is focused on and what it's prioritizing. And that gap is problematic, especially now if we've got this kind of powder keg. Did you find the same misalignment this year? And what does it look like heading in as we think about the next 12 months?
It has been misaligned the last few years, but not during COVID. One of the things that happened in COVID is everybody got on the same page. What do we need to prioritize? Where do we need to focus? What's important to make sure that our people can kind of survive and thrive through this period?
Sure.
So during that period, actually everyone got aligned, and steadily we've started to see those differences. This year, it's, as I said before, it's particularly stark. So in fact, I just grabbed the data because this is coming in a few weeks' time. When we asked executives which people priorities would deliver an ROI this year, top of the list, redesigning work to incorporate AI and automation, improving HR and people analytic capabilities, improving managers' abilities to lead an integrated workforce comprising of humans and AI agents. And then we get to kind of enhancing the employee experience. Whereas when we look at HR, top of their agenda is enhancing the EVP, designing talent processes around skills, hiring, learning, succession, rolling out new HR technology, and then improving our HR people analytic capabilities. So they're not completely misaligned. There is definitely overlap there, the different order of the top 5 or 6. But that focus of the C-suite around driving up productivity, improving performance, looking at how we can bring more AI into the workplace is a theme throughout the whole of the report. That is absolutely where they're putting their dollars, their focus, and they want to quicken the pace to start seeing the return. When we look at HR, you see something in all of the different silos of HR, whether it's focusing on the value proposition for reward, which is important because I think people's values about the deal have shifted and we haven't recalibrated. You see them focusing on talent processes. So how can we improve succession and high potential? The challenge is, if we're going to meet these expectations of executives and investors over here for exponential improvements in performance, it's going to be very tough doing it in our HR silos because you're really going to need east-west thinking, as my colleague Jason Averbrook used to talk about it, in order to achieve that. And that's not how many of our HR operating models are set up. And I think that is causing a bit of a drag on our ability to keep pace.
Well, and what I hear in that a little bit is, too, that the executives, when you started saying the third one about management capabilities, I was like, oh, maybe this is a good sign. But like everything in there is about, it would seem anyways, using AI to minimize kind of the human piece, or sort of, more AI, less human is what it sounded like. Now, that's a gross sort of overstatement or maybe misinterpretation, but you've got HR over here reminding us, I think, constantly, which is what is like, hey, we don't have the people side of things figured out, and now we're throwing this bomb of uncertainty and difference in there. I do think you're right that it feels like a rallying cry for HR to tell a different story or to be thinking differently about the narrative, because we still have so much work to do around how to optimize human performance, much less human performance augmented by AI or disrupted by AI, however you want to look at it. But it feels like a call for a different story, a different mindset, a different approach.
I think you're absolutely right. A different vision. I mean, I don't think the two are separate. I think they're two are one and the same. I do think that it's humans that are the force multiplier, not the tech. And actually, when we heard from executives, what are their biggest concerns for this year in terms of dampening growth? They said, 1, talent scarcity, and then not adopting technology fast enough. And that's the way I'm looking at it, because if your people are not inspired to use the technology, unlock commercial opportunities, we're not going to make progress on this agenda. I see that we have to do that, but I do feel the way that we've been thinking about our talent processes and our reward processes is too stagnant for the pace that things are moving. We still have clients in the report talking about we have to wait a year before we can promote people. We've got leadership blueprints that are still talking about traditional leadership competencies, When actually, as you mentioned right at the beginning, we've got to manage all these different paradoxes. We've got to set strategy and we've got to execute strategy. We've got to plan, we've got to pivot. We've got to build a digital first culture that's human centric. We've got to manage all of them, in tandem.
Yeah.
And it's a very different leadership blueprint to what we were talking about a few years ago. A few years ago, when we were going through those COVID years, the problems we were tackling were fairly linear. And so they had cause and effect. And, leaders that were empathetic, I think, winning the day. And now we need to balance both, because if we can't lead with digital leadership and be empathetic, we're not going to survive. But equally, if we can't align our business priorities with our performance priorities, we're not going to be here in a few years.
Right.
And it might not even be a few years, because I do think the speed of business is increasing so rapidly that we need to be thinking day one when people get in the door, how do we build the skills they need for the next role? Or how can we pivot the best talent to where we've got opportunities that might not be in their job description today? And when we look at one person in one job, fixed job descriptions, a year before you can move on, once a year or twice a year engagement survey, just feels out of step with the sort of changing. And that's the frustration I think I hear from executives in this year's report. They're sort of saying, really? Isn't there a quicker, faster way? Don't you have enough data as to who needs a stay conversation or what leadership behaviors are driving productivity today? Their asks around what data insights they want to drive their business are the same asks that we've seen over the last 5 years. We haven't made much progress on them though.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. One of the opportunities on the talent side of the business is, it feels like maybe AI can help get a broader picture or help, leverage tools to help them do some of that work, some of that. It's almost like there's catch-up work to get done, right? I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that needs to be happening faster. And certainly some of the AI tools that we have at our disposal today can help us with internal insights. But I think, is it true? And I don't know if you saw this, but I feel like one of the things that's getting in the way right now of seizing some of that opportunity is kind of one of the things that's always been in the way with HR organizations, which is they start with risk and then sort of move past that to, okay, well, if we can eliminate all the risk, then we'll take a look at what we can actually accomplish with this technology. And I feel like there's I think the relationship with risk needs to change, and it's needed to change for 30 years, but it definitely needs to change now because there is no zero risk environment anymore. It just isn't a thing, right? So we just need to be skilled at managing and mitigating risk as opposed to eliminating it. And I think that would change the game in terms of deployment of tools, it feels like.
I agree with you. And I do think the biggest business risk is people risk. And therefore, your greatest risk mitigation is having insights about your people in real time. And we've never been in a better position to have those insights, whether it is validated data around the skills that they have or the potential they have to take on a broader role or move forward, or whether it's just insights from what people are talking about in your organization or outside your organization. We used to have to wait once a year to do that annual engagement survey and ask a whole list of questions.
Right.
Like 2/3 of those questions you can get from other data without actually having to ask your people. We've been doing a lot of work with our clients looking at their reputation externally. So scraping data from a whole year and comparing it to the top 3 or 4 competitors, putting it through a traditional engagement lens and say, why do your workers leave for your first or second competitor? What are your first and second competitor doing better than you? Really specific feedback without surveying a single person. Now, if you've just been through a restructure this year and you don't want to be surveying your people, this is a great alternative. We've also got clients that are building synthetic personas. So they're using the data already existing in their organization so they can have a dialogue to say, hey, if we make this change to our flexible working policy or add better healthcare benefits, what's likely to be the response with this particular persona group? Again, without asking them. So we can start to actually be ahead of the curve because many of our HR processes look backwards. Let's evaluate last year's performance. Let's look at engagement data last year. And maybe in 6 months, we'll get around to doing something about it.
That's right.
But now you can have, an AI chatbot have a conversation at the moments that matter. So Jason, you've just taken on a new role. How are you settling in? Do you have what you need? How are you getting on with your coworkers? What 1 or 2 things you want different from your manager? and feed that information back straight away. And a big difference from the report 2 years ago to now is that actually people are thirsty for these type of AI tools. Give me AI tools that coach my skills. Give me AI tools that nudge me when I'm not moving fast enough. Give me AI tools that can tell me what are the best kind of learning and development opportunities given my destination role. And in the past, there was a reticence.
Yeah.
And with the younger generations, they would prefer to have a conversation on some of these tricky matters or to role play them with someone other than their manager. So I do think we're on that cusp of having AI that can do a lot of these processes in the background, set your SMART objectives for the year, give you nudges to make sure you stay on track, consolidate your feedback from your direct reports so that people don't see those sort of clunky once-a-year processes up front.
Yeah. That's the thing about, right, I think you use the word paradox. It feels like that's what we are. I'm working my way through Brené Brown's new book, Strong Ground, and she talks about paradox all the time. That being sort of one of the skills that we have to have as leaders is being able to straddle paradox. And that feels like where we're at, is that we have AI creating all of this complexity for us. But at the same token, there's such incredible opportunity if we can open our mind to those two things and hold space for both. AI is not the enemy. It's also not the savior, but it is some of both. And so in how we show up to it probably is a lot to do with what we get back from it. And so, Kate, last question I have for you is just, I'd be remiss if I didn't just kind of give you a chance to talk about, is there anything that I didn't ask you about today that's in this year's data set or an insight that really hit you as a wow, okay, that one really got me that I didn't tee up? Any juicy nugget that you can give us as we...
No, just listening to you talk there. I mean, we do assess how good leaders are at managing paradoxes. And our research says only about 18% are good at that. So we all need to get a lot better at it. And the way that we lead needs to look and feel different. So one of the, every year we ask people, are you thinking of staying? Are you thinking of leaving? And the people who are thinking of staying, why are you staying? And the people who are thinking of leaving, why are you leaving? One area that's risen up the ranks on why people are staying is because my leader inspires me against the future. So we are craving leaders who can paint that digital future that's exciting and inspiring. That has been missing for many of the workplaces. And then on the why am I thinking of leaving, a lot of it has been around the reputation. I'm not with a company that I believe in the vision. And I think we've got a generation coming through that really wants to work for an organization that has a purpose, one that sits with their values. And that's why listening to all the data signals, taking immediate action on them, or testing new policies with synthetic personas is just going to become more important. But we need leaders that are going to lean in with IQ, EQ, and DQ. And sadly, that's missing. One last question. We did ask people, what are the leadership traits that are going to be important this year, 2026, and what will be important in 2 years' time? Executives and investors say we need leaders who can manage risk. So you are right. We are definitely in a heightened risk climate. We want leaders who can manage risk, think strategically, understand how commercial priorities are changing. It's a very hard-nosed focus on what's critical. Employees are saying, I need someone who's going to understand me, empathize, and inspire. For them, it's all about EQ. And then all three groups said, but 2 years from now, we need to be a lot more digital than we are today. The challenge is, I don't think we've got 2 years. If we're going to step boldly into this future, we actually need leaders who can incorporate all three today. And that's new for all of us.
That is a big hill to climb too. That is a serious body of work, but a very serious body of work. So Kate, thank you for this. This was super fun for me. I love talking about data and finding. I appreciate the opportunity to geek out. Thank you for joining. And I hope that maybe next year around this time we can connect again, or in 2 years, whenever you come back and do more data. Anytime you've got data to talk about, I am game to give you a place to do it.
You know what? We have so much data to talk about. My biggest challenge is not feeding all these podcasts full of all the data points. Look, pretty much every topic from performance management to reward that is shifting. Workers' expectations are shifting. How we need to deliver on the deal is shifting, and we have got so much data. So, Jason, if you want to nerd out on any of those topics, I'm always willing. We're going to be doing regular pulse updates on this one because I don't think anyone can wait a year, let alone 2 years, to see how the water work's changing.
For sure. Well, thanks for the great work, Kate, and thanks for joining me to share it.
Oh, pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Jason.
And thank you for listening. I hope you can take something from this conversation back into your organization to help both your people and your organization thrive. Until next time.